Okay, so what if I told you that one of the wildest, most famous unsolved heists in American history wasn't really a crime story at all? What if it was actually a business plan? A really, really high-risk business venture? Think about it. It kicked off with a tiny $20 investment and somehow ended up costing an entire industry billions. So today, we're not going to just rehash the same old crime story. Nope, we're going to do something different. We're performing an economic autopsy on a legend.
But to get there, we actually have to start our story somewhere completely unexpected. We're not on an airplane in 1971. No, not yet. We're fast-forwarding almost a whole decade later. It's February 10th, 1980. Picture this. The Ingram family. They're just out for a nice little picnic on a sandy bank of the Columbia River, right there in Washington State. Just a normal family day out.
So there's 8-year-old Brian Ingram, and he's doing what kids do, He's clearing a little spot to build a campfire. And as he's digging around in the sand, his hand just brushes against something weird, something buried right under the surface. And in his own words, he later said, "I took my arm and raked it along the sand, and then I felt something fluffed up." Kind of strange, right?
So what was it? Well, what he'd found was just incredible. It was 3 rotting, decaying packets of $20 bills. They were still wrapped up in rubber bands. And when they counted it all up, the face value of all that soggy cash was $5,800, just lying there in the sand. But here's where the story gets its first, deeply ironic financial twist. You'd think finding a stash of cash is a huge win, right? Not for the Ingrams. See, they were a working-class family, living paycheck to paycheck. And this huge, world-famous discovery, it actually cost them money. Brian's dad had to take time off work to deal with all the FBI agents and reporters swarming the place, losing about $100 in wages. So, yeah, all that hassle for finding a small fortune they weren't even allowed to touch. Go figure.
Okay, so that begs the question, how in the world did a pile of rotting money get buried on a riverbank? Well, the FBI got involved, of course, and when they started analyzing the serial numbers on those bills, they traced him back to a very, very specific transaction. They were part of the $200,000 ransom paid to an airplane hijacker, a man known only as D.B. Cooper.
And that is where our story really kicks off. So let's dive into the core of this. Like I said, we're not going to look at this as just another crime. We are going to treat it for what it really was, a super high risk, but also super high reward, business venture. Let's just call it what it is, the $200,000 business plan.
Every good business venture has its phases, right? And this one, man, it was meticulously planned out. So, step 1, the initial investment. Just a single $20 bill for a one-way plane ticket. That's your seed capital, right there. Step 2, the leverage. Now, this is brilliant. No weapon was ever actually shown. Just a simple note passed to a flight attendant claiming he had a bomb. Talk about maximum impact with minimal overhead. Then, step 3, the demand. The terms were crystal clear, $200,000 in negotiable American currency and 4 parachutes. And finally, the climax, step 4, the transaction. Once they're on the tarmac in Seattle, the passengers, who were basically his collateral, are cleanly exchanged for the cash. A perfect deal. And let's just pause for a second to really understand the stakes here. That $200,000 back in 1971, you know what that's worth today? We're talking about roughly $1.5 million. That is an absolutely staggering return on a $20 investment. The ROI is just off the charts. But okay, you've got the money. Now what? How do you pull off the exit strategy? This is where the whole venture's key insight, its secret weapon really, comes into play. You see, the Boeing 727 had this really unique feature, an aft Airstair. Basically, a staircase built into the tail of the plane. And here's the kicker, the critical vulnerability that Cooper exploited. Nobody knew it could be opened while the plane was in the air. Not the airline, not the cops, nobody. This wasn't just a simple heist, it was a brilliant engineering exploit. So Cooper jumps, and the asset, all that cash, just vanishes into the night. So what happened next? What was the immediate financial fallout? Well, for the airline, it was definitely an insurer's worst nightmare, but maybe not in the way you'd expect.
I mean, the plan was just audacious. You lower the stairs at 10,000 feet and parachute straight into a freezing storm over the super dense forest of southwestern Washington. You want to talk about risk. From a business perspective, this is the absolute highest risk part of the whole operation. It's where the CEO, literally, bails out.
So let's break down the actual direct cost to Northwest Orient Airlines. The total loss was, of course, the $200,000 ransom.
But check this out. Their insurance company, a firm called Global Indemnity Co., they absorbed most of the hit. They paid out a claim for $180,000. That means the airline's actual net loss was just $20,000. All things considered, that's a surprisingly manageable financial hit.
But here's the thing. Cooper's plan didn't just cost one airline $20,000. Oh no. Its perceived success accidentally created an entirely new and, highly illegal market. Welcome everyone to the short-lived but absolutely frantic era of the Cooper Copycat.
And the data here tells a crazy story. In just the 5 months after Cooper's jump, at least 5 other hijackers tried to copy his exact method. We're talking demanding cash, demanding parachutes, and planning to jump from the back of a 727. Some of them even upped the ante and demanded bigger ransoms. It's like Cooper had accidentally published a successful, though obviously flawed, business model, and suddenly all these criminal entrepreneurs were lining up to get a piece of the action.
And this copycat market, it forced the entire airline industry's hand. And this right here is the real economic story. It's not about the $200,000. It's about the massive, long-term economic ripple effect. It's about a whole industry's worth of unplanned expenses.
So this one event, this one guy, and the copycat trend he kicked off, it forced 2 enormous and permanent capital expenditures on every single airline. The consequences just rippled way, way beyond a single flight.
First up, the hardware fix. To close that security loophole Cooper had so cleverly exploited, the industry had to literally invent and install a brand new device. They even named it after him. It's called the Cooper Vane. It's actually a pretty simple aerodynamic wedge that physically stops the Airstair from opening when the plane is flying. But here's the thing. This became a mandatory fleet-wide modification. Just try to imagine the cost of having to retrofit every single Boeing 727 in the entire world.
And that leads us to the even bigger cost, the one you and I live with every time we fly. The whole DB Cooper hijacking spree was a major catalyst for what we now think of as modern airport security. Universal passenger screening, metal detectors at every single gate. This one event essentially helped create a brand new, permanent, multi-billion-dollar cost center for the entire travel industry, all because of one guy.
So let's circle all the way back and tally up the final balance sheet. Remember, we started this whole thing with some rotting money found by a kid on a riverbank. Now, let's analyze the final return on investment. But we're not talking about the cash anymore. We're talking about the ROI of the legendary story itself. Okay, let's track the value of this weird asset over time. In 1971, the Ransom's face value is 200 grand. Cool. By 1980, the little bit they found is worth just $5,800. A huge drop. But then in 2008, Brian Ingram, the kid who found the money, decides to sell just 15 of those rotting old bills at an auction. And their sale price? $37,000 for 15 bills.
This is what you could call the Providence Premium. Let's break that down. The actual face value of those 15 $20 bills? Less than $300. Yet they sold for over 100 times that amount. And why? It's simple. Because the story attached to them, their history, their provenance, was infinitely more valuable than the ink and paper they were printed on. In the end, the legend itself became the most profitable asset of the entire venture.
Which brings us to our big final question. When you really stop and think about it, when you factor in the initial ransom, the millions spent on industry-wide retrofits, the billions spent creating the entire airport security system we have today, and even the incredible cultural value of the legend itself, you have to wonder, could that single, ordinary $20 bill used to buy a plane ticket back in 1971 be the most impactful $20 ever spent?